Hello, hello. How are you, Tim? We'll get started shortly. Let a few other people join. Thank you for joining tonight. Thank you for being here. I don't even remember. Oh, I went to dinner at Chili's. It was cool. My daughter likes Chili's, so she kind of chose it for me. And I got a gift card for my birthday, so that kind of worked out. Hi, Anna. How are you? My birthday was good. Thank you for asking. I just went out to dinner, hung out with family. It was a good time. I had a friend come out of town. We did a hibachi grill. That was fun. Mr. Claude Willie, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing.
I just saw
I'm
you
doing
come across my calendar. Looking forward to talking with you.
okay. You stay on top of things, don't you?
Yeah, even when I'm like multitasking, I was like try to keep on top of things.
That's great. I look forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Me too. We'll let a few more people join. Tonight, we're just going to be kind of going over questions, answers, things you guys might be struggling with, anything that you guys want to talk about. We're going to just leave it kind of an open floor tonight. And, a lot of things changing in the credit world, not necessarily changing, but I would just like banks are definitely tightening up. And I'll share with you guys something. I don't know if I told you guys or if I was telling someone on a coaching call, but Chase Bank, how they have like all these relationship managers that do these DocuSign applications with people, like how, we had Brian come on. He was talking about how he has a good relationship manager at Chase and they will send you a DocuSign, right? Well, they do that so they can push you through underwriting and get you a higher limit approved. And the paper applications help them do that, right? Well, as of July 1st, that program, well, not necessarily that program, but I will say the DocuSign program where they can send you the document to DocuSign is ending. They are no longer allowing relationship managers to send a DocuSign application and get it signed. And there's a few things behind that, and I'll kind of share like my knowledge, right? And I told you guys, for those of you that have been here for a while, you probably may have remembered me talking about I had spoke with one of the guys that used to work at Chase that was a relationship manager at Chase, right? And he left and went to Bank of America. And it was kind of funny because, well, not funny, it wasn't funny, but it was a coincidence that I had a coaching call with a gentleman, right? And he was saying that he had joined one of these influencers communities and he paid like $1,000 or something ridiculous to access their bank reps connections, right? And one of the bank reps that he was telling me about was this guy called Mo. That's his name. And he used to work for Chase. And I was telling him, like, hey, Mo doesn't work for Chase anymore, by the way. Right. I had to tell him that. And he's like, what? No, I just talked to him. And I was like, no, he works for Bank of America, because where you want to be at with the relationship managers is LinkedIn, right? Because they're going to put all their business out there on LinkedIn. So I had already saw on LinkedIn that he went over to Bank of America. He left Chase because it was getting hot back then. And I want to say this was like either earlier this year or the end of, 2024, right? And yeah, we'll get to that in just a second. I'll be more than happy to help with that. So with the whole, relationship managers, he was telling me, I was like, hey, can you just recommend me to like your partner or someone else at Chase that would be a good, RM, relationship manager. He was telling me, hey, you don't want to go through a relationship manager. You actually want to have your clients go to their local Chase branch and find a relationship manager on the business side and have them work with their local rep. Because what's happening is all of these guys are not supposed to be working with people outside of their territory. They're supposed to be just working with people that are local to them. So they started they started getting all these high limit approvals. People are not paying it back now, right? And because of course they got a lot of the wrong people approved, so they're having a huge turnover with that, and it's all the same reps. So a lot of these reps now, a lot of their accounts are like red flagged, so people are getting their accounts shut down left and right. And also those reps are now told, hey, you can no longer help people out of your jurisdiction. Like basically, you can only help people in this area. So that's kind of what's happening with Chase. And I was telling you guys this from the gate, like, hey, your best bet, instead of paying a relationship manager 10% of whatever you get approved for, your best bet would to just go interview, sit down, go into the branch, sit down, maybe offer to take them to coffee so you can go outside of the branch and have a real conversation, because everything in there is recorded. Okay. So you have to go about this strategically and say, hey, look, I want to just make sure that, Chase is going to be the right bank for me. I'm looking for X, Y, and Z. I'm looking for a $50,000 business credit card. I want to make sure that, you can eventually work with me on a business line of credit once we build our relationship up. Right. And making sure that you're working with like an experienced business relationship manager at Chase, someone that's been there for a few years, right? Interview them as if it would be someone that you were going to work for or work with, but interview them. And if you don't like one at one branch, go to another branch. I'm sure there's multiple branches in your area, and you can find a relationship manager that is confident that they can get you what you need. And as long as you have those high limit, comparable trade lines on your credit report, you'll be perfectly fine. Because I probably have shared with you, one of my other clients that I work with, she's actually not in this group, but she is a restaurant owner, and she built her relationship up. Well, not relationship, I should say, but she built her credit report up, added higher limit comparable credits. We added a couple high limit authorized user accounts, then went and did the whole Navy Federal, got 25,000 with them. It was either 20 or 25,000, but it was a good high limit, because before that time, her highest credit card was like $800. So it was constantly maxed out, right? Because she's spending a lot on the restaurant. And then basically we built up her credit profile. So when she did go to Chase, she just walked right into her local branch. They gave her 30,000 on the business side and like 18 on the personal side. And they were pretty shocked. They were like, yeah, that's pretty good limits. And they're like, it's because of your credit report. So if you build your credit report properly and you take the time, you invest in it, you're going to get those same type of approvals. Yeah, a relationship manager might be able to get you a little bit more, but think about it. If you get a $50,000 credit card through a relationship manager or a funding person, right? You're paying 10%. So off the bat, whether it's a 0% interest credit card or not, they're going to send you an invoice for you to pay that invoice. And that's $5,000 that you're going to be in debt on that credit card off the bat. Right. So I just feel like that's a lot of money for a small business owner to eat for a $50,000 credit card that, you could probably do just fine with 30,000, and then work your limits up from there. But, it depends. Some people, they have the money. It's no big deal to them, and they would rather pay to play. Hey, fine by me. That's kind of what's going on with Chase. They're kind of cracking down on everything because, we were seeing all of those $50,000, $75,000 credit card approvals, all these high limit credit card approvals through the Chase business side. And, it's still the case. You can still get high limits from there, but just probably don't need 75,000. You may not need 50,000, right? And that's probably what we're going to start seeing is about 50K or less. I don't really see them wanting to give somebody 75 or 100,000 on a credit card anymore. But, we'll see if we can get those high limit approvals after July 1st with them cutting out the DocuSign program. And that's going to force everyone to go through the website. So everyone is going to be using the very same application on the website. So if you have strong credit and you're like, hey, I want to give my shot, just, do an online application, then do it, But in my opinion, I always recommend people go into the branch when it comes to Chase, because you can build that relationship up with them a little bit better. You don't need a bank account with them to get a credit card with them. My client did not have a bank account with them. She had a personal business, or I'm sorry, a personal Chase account, but she did not have a business bank account with Chase, and still got 30K on the business side and 18 on the personal side. For the personal side, to get those higher limits, go after their travel cards, because they're always going to give a higher value on the travel cards, especially like the signature cards. Those are the ones that you want to look for. And another cool thing before I forget, just to kind of reiterate, Chase is also really cool because you can transfer your credit limits. So say my client, she got 30K on the business side and 18K on the personal side. If she was like, hey, let me just transfer all 18,000 of my credit limit on the personal side over to my business side, because on the business side I have 0% interest and it doesn't report to my personal credit, then now she would have 48,000 on a 0% interest business credit card, because it allows you to transfer from personal to business or business to personal. I don't know that I would recommend going from business to personal, but if it makes sense for you, it makes sense somehow. You can close that $18,000 card and have, that for, an extra card, because they're only going to give someone about 3, maybe 4 credit cards per social security number. But you can balance transfer the credit, or you can not balance transfer, but you can transfer the credit limit and then just close the card. So you're not going to waste that card on anything. And you can do that time and time again, and with these 0% interest cards. So I know, let's see, Anna had a question. Any other questions about Chase before I get off that topic? Come off mute, ask if you have any. Okay, no other questions about Chase. Very cool. All right, so Anna, you had a question. Struggling with an auto loan that is reporting charge off, but my client was the co-signer, and now the owner of the car, which is from Kia Finance, filed bankruptcy, Chapter 13, and now the remark on the account is as it's included in a bankruptcy. Yeah, that's a really tricky situation, right? Because this is why I never recommend anyone to ever co-sign in exchange. If like someone ever needs a co-sign, then it's like, hey, let's help you get your credit fixed instead of needing a co-signer, because this is something like this does happen. Now it's affecting 2 people in a very negative manner. So what I would do in this situation is I would either call in with your client over the phone, or have your client call in to the credit bureaus and let them know that this account is not yours. It does not belong to you. You do not have a bankruptcy, and so on and so forth. And let them know, hey, I have already contacted the creditor. They told me to contact you. Obviously, someone may have used my information to illegally co-sign for a vehicle for me, because this kind of stuff happens all the time. A lot of people get their names on autos and don't even realize like that actually was happening. Like they're now a co-signer for this vehicle. So that's what I would try to do. They may want something in writing, but if you do an affidavit, even if it's a truth affidavit, you can, have ChatGPT draft up a simple affidavit and go get it notarized by a public notary at the UPS store. I think it's like $15 or so, but get it notarized and send a copy of that notarized affidavit to each of the credit bureaus. You can upload it on Experian. If you create an Equifax account, you can still dispute the account through Equifax Online and then upload the supporting documents. Same thing with the TransUnion. Only thing that sucks about TransUnion Online is they won't let you open up a new dispute if you already have any open. So you'd have to wait until that one's done. They do have chat support on their website during normal business hours, and you can call them, but you're going to need to get more aggressive with this, because with just simple disputing, I don't know that that will just, be enough. The phone calls are going to be important in this situation. You can also say, hey, I believe I was maybe mixed up with somebody else, because this is not my vehicle. This is not my account. I've never filed bankruptcy. I love that whole, like, I'm mixed up with somebody else, right? We're not saying it's identity theft, because sometimes that can like come back and bite us in the butt, right? But if it truly were, then you can file an FTC report. If your client was like, yeah, I kind of messed up, I did sign for it, we don't necessarily like want them to get in a pickle with themselves, right? So they could file an FTC report, but if they willingly co-sign for it, it might make it kind of difficult. So I would try the notarized affidavit, and I would also call in and let them know, hey, like I said, never had bankruptcy. Clearly, this is not my account. I just spoke with a new law office this week that I'm going to be putting in the credit community. They're like setting up my account with them. So I can connect you guys, and you can upload the reports to them and see if they can possibly assist. They don't charge anything up front either. That's the nice thing about these FCRA, FDCPA lawyers. They don't charge anything because they make their money on the back end, unlike, other people that aren't even like true lawyers. Sometimes they might charge people fees to go through like the arbitration process and like, all that stuff. But, if the FCRA lawyers can assist, they will. And if they say, hey, there's nothing that we can do, then you know that you kind of have to get a little bit more aggressive on the phone calls and just making it seem like they have you mixed up with somebody else, and, try the different motions and just see what comes about it. I feel like if you just keep on top of them, especially if the client becomes a customer with each credit bureau, they're more likely to help you. So sometimes you have to pay for like the credit monitoring directly with TransUnion, directly with Experian, and directly with Equifax. So they'll provide you with better service. Like, hey, I just saw my reports with you guys, and I see this account and it says something about a bankruptcy, and that is an error because I have never filed bankruptcy. I don't have a bankruptcy on my credit report. So I need you to remove this immediately, and even speak with a supervisor or manager inside of the fraud department, because they are the only ones that have the authority to block these accounts and really like take the action that we would need. Technically, they're supposed to do it if it's like a fraud type of thing. They're supposed to do it within 4 days, but it may take longer in this situation because, depending on if the client would like to file an FTC report, the FTC report is essentially what's going to get it blocked from the credit report within 4 days. So there you have it. Okay, next question. Andres, hey, thank you for joining tonight. See, quick question. Family member has a student loan with some late payments, even up to 90 days. Is there any way that we can fix that or improve that? Okay, great question. So when it comes to student loans, they do not report late until they're 90 days, which makes it super damaging for us, because all of a sudden you didn't get a 30-day late, you didn't get a 60-day late, all of a sudden you're slapped with this 90-day late payment, right? Now, with any other late payment, you could find out if the student loan servicer is willing to provide a goodwill adjustment. Now, with the student loan folks, they don't want to like report negative stuff. That's why they give you up to 90 days to make sure that it's like, hey, we're going to try our best to like get them to pay. But if they don't, 90-day late's going to go. Have the client call them, reach out to their credit department and see if there's a way that they can provide a goodwill adjustment to them. If they can't, you can still try, right? There's other ways you can try to contact the CEO, looking up the CEO's information on, like CEO contact. I think I put a bunch of them. If you type in late on inside the community, there's a bunch of websites that have, like I think a CEO email or something like that. But if you just type in late payments inside of here, there's a few websites that you'll find that you can search the CEO's information and try to send them an email directly, try to send them a letter directly, see if there's something that they can do to help out. Now, worst case scenario, what I do in these type of situations, if they're not willing to help, the CEO's not willing to help, and I'm like at a dead end, I start calling, right? I start calling into the credit bureaus and I'm like, look, this is an error. And, if they take the entire account off of the credit report, so be it. But in these type of situations, I don't like to do that because usually the student loans are the longest standing credit trade lines. So they provide the most amount of history for somebody because those are generally like the first credit accounts that they've ever had. Now, if there's just late payments all throughout it, then it might be best to try to dispute the account and just ask them to delete the account. But if we want to just update the 90-day late to paid as agreed, we can get a letter from the service provider, right? It's like official, right? Hopefully they'll mail you something or send you something via email that has like their letterhead. We modify the letter to say what we needed to say, basically. And like I've said before, it might not be ethical, but it works. And because here's the thing, the credit bureaus, they don't make outbound phone calls. All right. They also cannot communicate other than their 𝒊𝒂𝒅 system that pings back and forth, that speaks to, the creditors and the data furnishers in what's called a Metro 2 format, right? And that language is very, very minimal, right? And a lot of times things are miscommunicated and it can't get super detailed like sometimes we would need it to be. So what the credit bureaus tell us is, hey, if you have proof from the creditor, send it to us and we'll update it, right? But a lot of times you have to get a US rep on the line and call into customer service and say, hey, I've sent this in to you. I've sent the proof in. I've uploaded the proof to you. I've sent it in, multiple times, certified mail return receipt. Can you please help me get this corrected? Because I spoke to a really nice lady before and she told me to just send in the proof and she would correct it for me. And a lot of times it does help to become the customer with the credit bureau because now you're paying them a service. And a lot of times you'll get like a dedicated rep in like some cases to help you resolve these type of things. And that's exactly what you want, right? You want a real rep from the US that is going to get in there and fix it, right? And then within a few days, you'll see it start updating. So that's what I would try to do. Always ask for the goodwill adjustment, but in many times the student loans, they make it difficult because they don't want to hear from a third party. They want to hear it directly from the student. So sometimes like they can email through their portal. If they have like a servicer portal, they might be able to message through that, send them a letter, certified mail return receipt, like from the actual student, not from you, because they pay attention to all of that as well. So if it's coming from like a totally different zip code, they're going to be like, this isn't from them. Like, we think that someone else sent this on your behalf. So you really want to get your clients involved with things like this like you can draft the letter for them. You can put everything together for them and say, hey, all that I need you to do is just print these files or print this PDF file that I put together for you and mail it to this address, go to your post office, do a certified mail return receipt, and, we'll just see what happens. And then also, hey, here's the letter, send this to this email address because this is the CEO's email, but it has to come from their email, right? You can also get the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau there sometimes of help, and file a complaint with them and let them know that, they're reporting a 90-day late in error and you've sent all the documents to Experian. I would not send them the modified file because it's not necessarily legit, but you could say, hey, this is an error and I've sent them the proof and they have continuously failed to update it, correct it. And now I'm making a complaint against them. You can go that route. But again, it's best if those complaints, especially the CFPB complaints, come directly from the client. So have the client create an account and you can walk through with them on Zoom how to, do it, but it needs to come from their IP address because the CFPB is getting really smart as well. And I have the hardest time with them sometimes where they're sending clients the, stall tactic letters where they're like, hey, we got a complaint, but we don't think it's from you. So we're just going to ignore it. You can call in to the CFPB as well. So you can call in with the customer on the line, or if the customer feels confident doing it on their own, just have them call into the CFPB and make the complaint against all 3 credit bureaus or whatever credit bureau is giving you a hard time. And hopefully they will process that right there over the phone. Okay, another question we have. So follow up on Anna's repo. He does pay for all 3 credit bureaus. That's great. He removed the remark a few days ago, and recently 3 days ago they updated it so that it was included in the bankruptcy. Yeah, he needs to call them back and let them know that this account, he doesn't have a bankruptcy, so there's no way that this account is valid, and really hit the phones with the credit bureaus, especially because he is a paying customer, and have them remove that account from his profile because he is not included in that bankruptcy. And ask them, what do I need to send you in order for you to remove this? Because this has nothing to do with me and I don't have a bankruptcy on my file and I'm not included on any bankruptcy. So I need this removed from my credit, blocked from my credit, essentially. Okay, follow up from Andres. Yes, I have all the instructions in the CRC training for the CEO emails. So search through the community and it's all in there. There's a couple ones that I use a lot, which is the CEO. I want to say it's CEOemail.com or something like that. It's real easy. And that one has a lot of good email addresses. I also will send I'll have my clients send the CEOs messages on LinkedIn. If they can find them on LinkedIn and they accept messages, I'll also have them message them on LinkedIn, hey, I need help. I haven't been able to get help from anyone in your company. Hopefully you can help get this resolved. It was an error, blah, 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 blah. Right. And have ChatGPT help out because sometimes I don't know what to say, So I just go to ChatGPT and say, hey, write me a nice heartfelt email to a CEO of a company to ask them to provide a goodwill adjustment to paid as agreed because I made an error or something, let them know, hey, I was going through this and, or I was in the hospital. I have a client now who has been in the hospital for quite some time and had a late payment reported and it just killed his credit score. And it was Barclays, the bank Barclays. So we're trying to get that resolved, but it's it's like pulling teeth with some of these banks. You really have to be aggressive with it. And in this case, it's hard because my client's actually in the hospital, so he can't get too involved. So, sometimes I'll create an account, I'll create an email account for my client. If my client can't really get involved, I'll create an email account, their credit email account, and I'll email the CEOs for them. And I'll basically do everything as if, it were the client, but I have them sign an agreement for that. And obviously they're very much aware of that and also have access to that email. So it's a shared Gmail email account that we have. So that way I can send emails and, sometimes even then they'll do the stall tactics, but you just have to continue to try to chip away at it. The phone calls are really effective, but in this situation, it's kind of hard, right? But definitely get the clients involved. These student loans are hitting bad. Yep, they sure are. One of your clients did a refinance. They asked for income. She provided it. And now she's posting positive, which is a win. Yeah. And she's with NailNet. So that's great. Yeah. Because student loans went back to reporting. So I've been telling everyone for a while, please, even if you think that you have something worked out with your student loans, or you do have something worked out with your student loans, contact them, because they are back in effect. Payments are back in effect. And I've had a few people that have reached out to me that have gotten late payments with the student loan people, because they don't report until 90 days. And I don't know what type of notifications that they send out or how they let people know, right? But as soon as that 90-day hits, it's like a huge, like, just like basically cutting your credit score down 100 points, like a huge hit. And I had one of my clients, he did credit repair with me, and he was finished, all done. And now we have all of these late payments on Equifax. It's only on Equifax, which is really weird. And I have 2 clients like that, where their late payments with their student loans are only on Equifax. And it's just the weirdest thing, right? Weirdest thing. But yeah, if someone does get their student loans refinanced and their old accounts have late payments on it, just try to get those off, because sometimes they're not going to be helpful, even though they have the history. If they have spotted, payment history that's not good, just try to continue to dispute the account and try to get it off. And sometimes you can't get everything off, right? Sometimes it takes a long time to get some of this stuff off, because you're dealing with 3 separate companies, and sometimes one is super easy and the others not so much. Like, I have a client, we're dealing with a bankruptcy, and I've been working on his file for like a year, and the bankruptcy is only on Experian, only on Experian. And I've gotten all of the other accounts that were associated with the bankruptcy off. Everything else is off. The only one thing left is just this bankruptcy with Experian. And you just have to be consistent. You have to continue to fight them. And even though it seems like you've done everything under the sun, you have to continue to challenge them, and, have your clients call in, or call in with your clients on the phone, and try to really get aggressive with them. And, it's like, some things are just not going to be removed. And that's the bottom line. Some things are accurate, right? And it's really challenging to even get negative accounts that are inaccurate corrected. So when things are correct and they're like, yeah, we know this is you, it's like, well, we can only do so much, I feel like, right? But if you're aggressive enough, and if you try different tactics, there's tactics out there that work, right? Some people may not be comfortable with those tactics. I personally am not comfortable using the whole, the trafficking one. Like, I just don't really recommend it. It's tricky, but it works. A lot of people are getting really great results. Like, I talked to someone recently, and he went through whoever Credit Plug recommends to credit repair. I guess he's an affiliate with Crown Credit Pro, maybe, but they, charge a lot for credit repair, and, Credit Plug refers a bunch of people over to them. And basically they do identity theft sweeps for all of their clients, and like these trafficking sweeps. And that's why they're able to get results so quickly. And I'm kind of like surprised that, they are able to get off like things so fast using those methods. But then again, you think about, you read the law and you're like, hey, it says 4 days. If anything related to identity theft or trafficking, they are supposed to remove that within 4 business days. So it kind of goes like hand in hand, As far as the hard inquiries, yes, hard inquiries. So you definitely want to call the credit bureaus to get the hard inquiries off. Reason being is because you can't dispute inquiries online. There's just not, they don't even give you an option to dispute them online. You can dispute them via letter. That works too, right? So what I do with Experian is I'll draft a letter with all of the inquiry names and inquiry dates, exactly how it's listed with the Experian credit report. I'll literally just copy it from the Experian credit report and just put it on a simple letter and say, I didn't authorize these. I've already contacted the company, and they advised me to contact you and tell you that you need to block these from my credit report. They are false and unauthorized. And then I'll list out the name and the date, right? And sometimes, if I'm like being really aggressive with it, I'll do an FTC report for those inquiries as well. And I'll just put that statement in the personal statement on the FTC report that, the following inquiries are unauthorized. Because a lot of times, especially now, the credit bureaus are like, well, if you didn't authorize these, then we need an FTC report. And it's like, fine, if you're telling me that you need an FTC report to remove these from my credit report, then I will do that. But you can totally get around that with some people sometimes, right? You can speak to a manager, you can speak to a supervisor. It has to be someone in the fraud department. So when you call into customer service, you call in just to normal customer service, like, hey, I'm a paying customer, right? That's how you get a live agent on the phone. Because I had someone who texts me all the time and I always give them advice, right? And he was like, how do I contact the credit bureaus? So I sent him like my spiel that I have saved in my phone that I send to everyone. And he's like, well, I called and nobody answered. I couldn't get a live agent. I said, read the instructions again. And he was like, oh, okay. Yes, you're not reading thoroughly. You have to call in to customer service as if you're a customer. Why? Because you get a live agent on the phone that you can say, hey, live agent, can you transfer me to the fraud department? Yes, get transferred to the fraud department. And then when they answer, hey, is this the fraud department? Yes. Okay. Hey, fraud department, can I speak to a manager? Get the manager on the line. Hey, manager, I have had the hardest time getting through to you guys, but I need to get these unauthorized inquiries off of my credit report that are false. Here's the name and here's the date of them, right? Keep it simple. Don't over talk. And if they ask like, hey, did you contact the creditor? Absolutely. I've contacted them. They told me to contact you. Have you sent in an FTC report? Yes, I did send in an FTC report. I actually spoke to someone last week and I sent that in to you guys already. And I still have these inquiries that are unauthorized on my credit, which is a violation. And that's $1,000 violation per violation, right? Right now I have 3 inquiries. So that's $3,000 in violation plus whatever damages, you might want to call damages, right? So you kind of want to get a little aggressive with them if you have to, but I always like keep it simple. These are unauthorized, right? That's the magic word. Did you file an FTC? Yes. Did you contact the creditor? Yes. You've done everything that they're asking because they have to follow guidelines, right? So we want to just tell them, yeah, because the phone calls are recording. So they have to make sure that they're checking all these boxes. And a lot of times that'll do it. Once you get off the phone with them, usually within about 72 hours, you'll see those inquiries removed. You can only do one person per phone call though. Like I had a husband wife couple that, we're trying to do both of them on one phone call, which I don't recommend anyways, because it makes it seem like you're just trying to get things off your credit report. So one person, one file at a time. I wouldn't necessarily do more than like 5 inquiries per phone call because that might be like a little excessive. And you might have to just make multiple phone calls to the credit bureaus each day to knock a few down. If you've got 10, hey, I'm going to call in today and do 3. I'm going to call in tomorrow. I'm going to do another 3. Right now, you've only got a few left. So you can knock a few of those down and, just be careful with the inquiries that are tied to open credit cards. Okay. The loans, who cares? They're not going to close a loan because you disputed an inquiry, right? But if you dispute an inquiry from an open credit card, they could potentially. I've never had it happen to me, but it's just something you kind of want to handle with care, just like the whole me accidentally getting my clients' credit accounts shut down because I disputed the late payment. That's like a very much handle with care. Loans, who cares? They're not going to close the loans. I could care less about the loans. That's no problem. It's the credit cards that are the issue. And I've had some of my clients that I've worked with personally that I coach where they did the same thing and, not knowing and not really us discussing it, but they disputed late payments on an open credit card with, a pretty high balance. And that kind of triggered some red flags. And one guy had a Bank of America account closed, and she was like, what do I do? I'm like, dude, you need to tell him to go into a branch immediately and try to salvage that, because he was on vacation. He couldn't use his credit card. It wasn't totally maxed out, but she was disputing the late payments on the open credit card. So that's a risk that you take. I've had two people's accounts that closed. One was with Macy's and one was another like small credit union, like out of Florida, I think it was. But, nonetheless, it's very tricky. So you want to just handle those with extreme care. Okay, let me get back up to some of your guys' comments and stuff. Okay, so Tim, yep, call into the credit bureaus to get those inquiries removed. Best if you call into customer service, then get transferred to the fraud department. Once you verified that you're with the fraud department, just get a manager on the phone. Immediately request to speak to a manager, and that's always helpful. Okay, so Andres has a question. This is the only negative item on their credit report, and they want to pay me to help them fix it. Since it's just this one account, what do you think is a fair price to charge in this case? I mean, for the student loan item. Okay, so as far as Andres goes, he's asking about a customer and they only have a 90-day student loan. That's a tricky one, right? Because there's no guarantee that you're going to be able to get a 90-day late payment corrected with an open active student loan if it was like recent, especially if it was accurate, right? So in these type of cases, like where it's just this one thing, you might want to do like a pay for deletion type of thing, right? So if you can get it done, and it kind of, this method is like not preferred by me at all, but these are the type of situations that are like super, super tricky, because there is a chance that you might not be able to get this updated, right? But over time, like when you have like marked all of these boxes off, like, hey, I've requested the goodwill adjustment, I've done this, I've done that. It may take 3 to 6 months just to get this one little thing off all three bureaus, right? You could do a pay for deletion, but then you take the risk of them not paying after it's corrected, right? Not necessarily deletion in this case, but pay for, results type of thing. Or you can offer them like a one-time fee of, X amount of dollars, and you'll just continue to hack away at it for, up to 6 months, say, right? And after that 6-month period, you can say, look, I have tried all of these different methods, and unfortunately, this just might be something that we can't get corrected, right? Although I will say that that loan hack where we get the letter from the company, from their letterhead, it's got the account information, the date, all that good stuff, the client's information, and we just modify the letter inside of, I use Adobe, what is this? Adobe Acrobat, and I will just edit the PDF to say what I need it to say and then send that into the credit bureaus. That works pretty darn well, but you do have to like follow up sometimes with a phone call and kind of get, a supervisor involved to like see, hey, this is what I uploaded, or, where do you want me to upload this right now so you can review it and correct this for me over the phone? I really need your help, So those are some options as far as like pricing goes, because these type of things take a lot of time. So I would say, like, if this were me, I would charge them $299 and I would try to work on it for up to 6 months with them. Just a one-time payment of $299, and then, try for 6 months and see what you can do. Was this late payment recent? I'm just wondering, like within like the last few months, because I know this was like all okay. Yeah. So it was like super recent. Well, all you can do is try, right? And if you can't get it off in 6 months, it might just be one of those things that don't come off. And you can be transparent with people and say, look, this is why it's so important to make sure that you've got all this stuff set up. But I'm pretty confident that, using the steps that we've discussed and just being a part of this community, that you can help them get it resolved. But it might not be something super fast. So they need to keep everything else in good standing, make sure that they are, making their payments on time to the student loan folks, and, doing everything that they can on their end. And then, you can work on, trying to contact their student loan service provider. Who is their service provider? Do you know? Okay. Yeah, if they want to do it, it's worth a shot for them, because I feel like, you are going to put effort and you're going to make sure that you do everything that you possibly can to see if you can get this corrected. Okay, so next question from Tony. They asked you if you filed an FTC report and they actually checked, and that's for the inquiries. And then, yes, there is a template. There is a template. Yes, let me show you guys where a lot of these letter templates are. And what I like to do, even if like someone shares a template with me, you always want to kind of put that thing into ChatGPT and have chat reword it so that way it's a super custom letter that nobody has ever used. Before ChatGPT, I used to use apps. I forgot some of the apps names, but it was basically like these reword apps. So I would put the letter templates into these apps to like reword them, and it did a pretty good job. So same concept here. So inside of the classroom, you've got the dispute letter library right here. Under here, you'll find a ton of different letters. So this is the letter library inside of the Google Drive. There's a ton of letters in there, but I've also put them in here. So if you keep on scrolling through, some of these are just like ones that you can use for round 1 or round 2 or round 3. Now, obviously, these are extremely long and they include all of these different USC codes inside of the Fair Credit Reporting Act, which is probably not necessary, especially if you're not even talking about any of this stuff. But this is the USC code that is for inquiries, permissible purpose, which is 1681B. And that is what you want to create a dispute letter around, is this code right here. But there are, particular letters that have to do with inquiries. So here's the personal information, ID theft with FTC, and proof to credit bureaus. Now this can be multi-purpose. So if you were saying, hey, I'm going to, put my inquiries on an FTC report, you could potentially use that as well. There's a late payment here. There's another late payment, Let's see. Request removal of incorrect info for creditor, debt validation for collection, another late, golly, so many late, debt validation letter for credit bureaus. Here it is, inquiry removal letter for credit bureaus. And then of course I put here list account name and date of inquiry. So basically the data furnisher's name. So you could take this letter, and there's probably a few variations. Yeah, here's the different variations. This one is to the creditor. Like this is like a last ditch effort. Like, hey, I'm like sending you a notice, but they're not really going to be able to do anything, right? The only time that I ever really tell anyone to use that is if the credit bureaus are giving you a really hard time, then you can do a letter just to show them, hey, I've already sent them a letter and here's the proof of it, right? But use these and just kind of put them into ChatGPT. So like, for example, if I were to kind of restructure this letter, I would just take this right here, copy it, open up ChatGPT and say, hey, make this dispute letter to the CRA's credit reporting agency shorter and better to remove hard inquiries from my credit report. And it'll spit out a nice, compact letter. If you want to add anything or modify things, you can totally do it, but that's much shorter and to the point. I like short, sweet, and to the point. And then the only thing that you would want to do is just list out the date and the name, or the name and the date. And I literally copy it exactly how it is listed with the credit report. So if it's Experian, you log into Experian and just copy and paste that, and you can just put that into like a Google Doc or Microsoft Word. And what I do is kind of build like a PDF file. So I'll put the letter that has everything documented. I'll put the client's ID, social security card, and proof of address. So there's no question as far as like they can verify this person, right? I'll put everything into a PDF file as if I was going to print out this entire like file and mail it in, and then I'll upload it to Experian.com/upload. And I love upload because you can call in like a few hours later or the next day, and they'll be able to see the upload, and there's no like login required. So as long as you have all of your clients' information, type it in. Definitely want to be using a VPN when you're doing this, and that's going to mask your IP address, because if you continuously upload from your same IP address, they will block you. They're eventually going to figure out, oh, okay, they're just doing this for credit repair. And sometimes you might have an issue logging in because you're using a VPN. So if you are experiencing issues or you're not able to use the system, it's probably because you're using a VPN or you've already been blocked. Okay. So you just say, hey, client, go to this website. Here's the PDF file. Just fill this out. And sometimes I'll just do a video, like a quick video, like in Loom for my clients, like, hey, here's the website, click on it that I sent you from your email, fill out your information, go to the next page and upload the file attached to this email and hit submit. That's all that they have to do. They don't have to put anything in the statement except for see attached proof or see attached letter, but that PDF file would have essentially everything that your client would need. And, sometimes you will have to file an FTC report if the inquiries were truly unauthorized, but that's okay, because really nobody checks that FTC database, and it's really just for them and their processes, because that's what they're told they need by the credit bureau. So if that's a checkbox that they have to have because you're saying, hey, these are, essentially fraudulent, right? These are unauthorized, whether we applied for it or not, or whether they told us it was going to be a hard pull or a soft pull, or, the auto dealerships, they never tell you they're going to run your credit 20 times, right? The bottom line is we just have to list all of those unauthorized inquiries on that FTC report. And that way we have, like the proof in the pudding that we're truly saying that these are unauthorized. And in the personal statement, that's where I put it at. On the FTC report, you'll get to, I think it's like the third page or so. And there's like 3 spots for inquiries on that report. And then you can add additional ones inside of the consumer statement and just put, hey, there are unauthorized inquiries on my credit file that I request to be removed. And you can just list those out on there. So at least they're documented on there. And then after they verified, they removed in 24 hours last month. Okay, good. So yeah, so that did work. So that's great. I'm glad that they removed them. They're usually pretty good about that. Experian is the easiest because you have the upload feature. TransUnion and Equifax might try to give you some slack, but anytime they give you slack, like, hey, can I speak to a manager, please? Because they don't realize that you are an educated consumer and you know that, hey, if I'm saying that this is unauthorized, or if I'm saying this is an error and you're telling me that you can't help me or that you need this, that, and the other, that is a violation. Okay. So sometimes you just have to get those managers on the line. And the great thing about a lot of these letters inside of the community is they have all of the USC codes in them. So say you're like, man, I don't really know like which USC code I should use for my letters. Like I've got a bunch of stuff inside of the community. Like there's so much information in here. It takes a while to get through it all, right? But you can look at this letter and say, okay, willful liability for non-compliance. Like you can use that, right? Because they are willfully non-complying to your request. So anyone can really use that, right? Aggravated identity theft, like if that is the case, right? But looking at all of these unfair practices, that's, a lot of people could potentially use that, right? But there's a lot of these USC codes that are in here. And if you're like, I'm not sure if this would apply to me or not, always look at the law. You can look at the law using the Cornell Law website. And I'll show you in just a second where some of these other USC codes are. But, all of these that are in these letters, you can potentially use these in some of the dispute letters that you guys are creating, right? Like the validation of debts. debts, 1692G. This is great for like collections and, just different debts that are on your credit report that you're disputing. Permissible purpose, 1681. That's for like the inquiries. But, going through some of these has really helped me kind of understand how to create dispute letters, because I used to waste so much time like, oh my God, am I doing the dispute letter correctly? Am I putting the right codes in there? It was so stressful, but you have to realize like a lot of those codes can be used for multiple purposes. And I actually, when I was speaking to the law office this week, they sent me some of the most common violations. So I'm getting ready to put those in the community. Those should be up by next week. So that way you guys can kind of piggyback off that. And they also sent me some dispute letters that they use as lawyers. So I'm going to share those with you guys as well. Let me look up FCRA law, because I know there's so much in here, but I know I put some that are FCRA that are connected to the Cornell Law website, which is the Learning the Law. So this is under classrooms and it's under ebooks, and there is a Learning the Law ebook. And this has all of the different sections for the law. Now, we are primarily probably going to be using the Fair Credit Reporting Act. And, there's different sections, right? You can see here, this is the Consumer Credit Protection section. This is 15 US Code Chapter 41. That is Consumer Credit Protection, right? And then all of these subsections are different, different laws that are going to protect the consumer. The one that we are primarily looking for are the credit reporting agencies, right? So this is going to break down all of that in here, and you can take a peek. These are all of the basic laws that we would be using inside of our dispute letters right here. Credit reporting agencies, right? Permissible purpose right there. Block of information resulting from identity theft, right? 1681C2. And it's saying right here, no later than 4 business days after the date of receipt by such agency, right? And they're telling you right here, this is the law. So if they're giving you any slack about it, you can say, hey, I just read the credit reporting law for the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and you can state the law to them and say, hey, look, according to 15 US Code 1681C2, you are required to block identity theft from my credit report within 4 business days. And I guarantee you, once you start talking this to them and saying, I know my rights as a consumer, and I also know that you violating these laws is $1,000 violation plus damages that you have caused due to your negligence. And watch, I guarantee that will help spark a little fire under their rear to get them to do what you're asking for, because at the end of the day, they don't need any more lawsuits than what they already have, right? Okay, next question after that. Shola, hello there. How are you? What's a good strategy if you wanted to get 200K in funding in less than 6 months with an aged shelf corporation, also while satisfying Experian, Equifax, SBFE, Dun & Bradstreet, and PayNet? Ooh, that's a lot, right? Number one, Dun & Bradstreet is really not going to be used by a lot of financial institutions, right? So if you are looking to get funding using a shelf corporation, you have to really have a personal guarantor, because basically there's no revenue in the business. There's no tax returns in the business. So initially going into it, and there may well be, in the next 6 to 12 months after you acquire the aged business, right? But initially it's going to be nothing, right? When you buy a shelf corp, you're going to request the EIN number. There's literally nothing on there. You also want to consider, like, if you're buying a shelf corp, a lot of them are out of like New Mexico or Colorado or somewhere of that nature, right? So you may have to file a foreign entity where you plan to apply for credit. Like, for example, like Truist, right? If you're not near a Truist branch, you're not going to be able to even open up a bank account with them. So a lot of times you'll have to have that foreign entity wherever you're doing business. But if you have a guarantor for the business that has a good credit score, maybe even yourself, that's what you're going to need. Or it can be a credit partner. A lot of people bring credit partners onto their business to guarantee the funds, but you're going to need to have like a proper layout of how you plan to use these funds and how you plan to grow the business using these funds, right? So put together just a brief business plan. You can use ChatGPT. There's actually videos inside of the credit community that talk about, how to create that business plan. I would definitely also watch this business credit masterclass. There's like 5 different parts. Part 1, I think, has the business plan in it, but definitely watch this because this is going to give you a lot of great insight. There are 5, actually 6 different videos because part 4 has 2 parts. It was so long we had to break it up, but this has a ton of great information in there. And then, initially you're only going to qualify for business credit cards because of the fact that the business has no revenue. And in those cases, the only thing that you can get are, business credit cards. Now, if you spend some money and build out the, trade lines, you can get business trade lines. I have business trade lines that report to Experian and SBFE. And those are the 2 most valuable because banks don't really use Dun & Bradstreet, right? Dun & Bradstreet is great for vendor accounts. You can get some other things approved like a Sam's Club, but you can also get a Sam's Club with Experian approved. You could maybe get an EIN only vehicle, but even if you get an EIN only vehicle because you built up Dun & Brad so high and you went through Ally to get it, Ally is going to be a high interest rate. So it might not even make sense for someone at that point. I remember years ago, I thought I was going to just build up my Dun & Bradstreet so I can get all this funding, but gas cards, store cards, net 30 accounts. I got approved for a car through Ally, but the interest rate was like 10%. And the other interest rate that I had got approved for was like 3 point something. So it was like a 7% difference. That just didn't make sense, So I was like, yeah, no thanks. So you just have to make sure that it makes sense. Dun & Bradstreet's kind of like, it's important to build it up, but it's like people have the misconception of like the type of funding that you're going to get approved for. It's great for like, getting, vendor accounts, supplier accounts. If you want to rent places, a lot of times they'll check Dun & Bradstreet, but it's very minimal, right? A lot of businesses, or I'm sorry, not a lot of financial businesses like banks, they're primarily like, probably going to be a member of the SBFE. So that's important. And they're probably going to be looking at Experian. A lot of banks look at the Experian business side, but for the business credit cards, it's really just personal credit based. As long as you have the business structured properly, you make sure that you're using the right numbers on your credit applications for the business credit cards. That's really important because you're going to want the projected income to be kind of on the higher side, especially if your business has already been established for, 5, 6, 7 years, whatever the case may be, right? You want to make sure it just makes sense for them to give you a $50,000 credit card, right? So I would say, the business credit card stacking on the business side is probably going to be one of the only options that's initially available to you until your business starts generating some revenue. And then once your business starts generating some revenue, and even before then, you might qualify for like a SBA, like a small micro SBA loan. Probably not going to be anything really over like 50,000, to be honest with you. And then you can get that, pay it off, and then move to the next level. Once your business starts generating revenue, has tax returns, then you can qualify for more funding, maybe better SBA loans, as long as you have that business plan together. That's essentially what the SBA is looking for. And I went over that in detail inside of part 1's masterclass. So definitely watch this, because there's a lot of different ways that you can do it, but with no revenue, no tax returns, essentially you're just a shelf corp. It's primarily just the business credit cards that you're going to qualify for initially for like that round 1, maybe even round 1 and round 2 funding. But that's okay, because you can have multiple people guarantee for your business. As long as they have good personal credit, then you can get funding through the credit cards. Very few banks are still providing business lines of credit without tax returns or, some sort of financial records. There might be a few that you can find that still offer that. The way that you have to do is you have to get in the trenches and you have to call these banks and interview them over the phone and ask them, what type of business credit products do they offer? What type of limits do they offer? What does the approval process look like for them? What type of documents are required to get approved for the business credit card? What type of documents are required to get approved for the business line of credit, or the equipment line of credit? Either way, it's a line of credit, So for example, like at Bank of America, I had one of my clients, she actually needed to get a new equipment for her business. So I was like, hey, Bank of America has the best rates. So she went to Bank of America, but they wanted 2 years worth tax returns. And I think she only had like 1. So now she's actually working towards that, because now she knows what their requirements are and they do have the best rates. So she's like, yeah, I definitely want to build up to that, because, sometimes when you get equipment, it can be very expensive. And if you're paying a really high interest rate, like in the 20%, it just doesn't make sense for some people, it's a real setup. So it kind of sucks, but you can easily go to like probably 4 or 5 different banks and try to get, closer to a $50,000 business credit card. US Bank, Truist, Chase, Bank of America is also really good. Credit unions, but finding those local banks that are close to you that invest in their community. There's also the CDFI, Community Development Banks. I talked about that in this masterclass. You want to find those banks, because even though your business personally might not have the best credit score, they will still fund local community businesses because they have an invested interest in their community. So if your business is going to provide value to their community, they're going to want to fund your business. But again, it all comes down to that business plan. Like, what's your plan? What do you do? How are you impacting the community, right? And I would definitely put that into your business plan so you can go to some of these community development programs at these banks that are local to you, and even interview them and say, hey, what do you require? Because you might find some banks that are still out there that are saying, hey, we don't require any documents for a business line of credit, right? And there's still a few out there, right? But the big boys, they are, Truist they were one of the last standing ones that were real popular for the business line of credit, but now they require documents, right? I was recently told by one of my clients that the Bank of Nevada, which is a local to, the West Coast here, they are still providing business lines of credit without any documents. My only question was, do we have to be local to the bank, to the branch, because like, for example, Truist and like US Bank, if you're not close to a branch, you can't open up a bank account. So I'm waiting to hear back from them about that. And he's supposed to be sending me his contact over at the bank so I can get a little bit more detail and kind of understand it. But, you have to interview these banks, especially if you're looking to build a relationship with them. Don't be afraid to ask these questions to them. Get your questions down. And a lot of it's going to stem from, what type of approvals are you guys seeing for the business line of credit? what type of limits are you guys approving for your credit cards? What type of documents are going to be required for the business credit card approval? Well, usually it's none, right? But if they're like, oh, well, we want tax returns, that's not the bank for you, right? Cross them off the list. But, do interviews with them. Sometimes that's really what it takes. If you're true to getting this 200K in funding, the money is definitely out there, but sometimes you just have to kind of get in the trenches and, do some digging and see, okay, which banks are local to me? Because the big boys, right? I gave you all the big boys. There's all the big boys that are listed in these master classes as well, right? But a lot of them, they might want documents for just some, little equipment loans and lines of credit. The credit cards are free and clear. You're not going to have docs with the credit cards. That's one thing that we know for sure. But anything else, even the autos, sometimes they might want a little tiny bit of docs, depending on who you go to. Bank of America is pretty good about it. They generally don't want any proof. I have had a few people that got approved for like 75,000 and then they requested tax returns. And they're like, well, what do? I don't have tax returns. And I'm like, you don't qualify, because they're not going to just say, hey, give us your tax returns and we'll review them, right? No, they want you to sign a form for them to go pull the tax returns for themselves, right? So you don't qualify. The deal is dead, right? So that's just how it goes. But hey, whatever. You just have to take it, learn from it, and next time watch the numbers, because I think he put closer to like $500,000 in revenue, and it was also a $75,000 auto loan. So it's like, you gotta be careful. Maybe ask for 60,000 and not so much on the revenue where they're going to want validation of that. So sometimes you have to walk that fine line. And that's sometimes where it comes in handy to get to know that relationship manager, so you can kind of, pick their brain a little bit and like, hey, this is my projected income, but you think if I put this on the application that you guys are gonna, want my tax returns or something like that? I don't mind giving it to you, right? But I just want to be prepared. And if they say yes, then it's like, okay, I love to pick their brains, because they will give you information without knowing that they're giving you information if you ask the right questions. Okay. And a lot of times that's what it takes, is just you interviewing them. And that's why I always have like a call with my relationship managers that I do work with. And like a lot of them, I just can't send people their way because they don't qualify yet, So you have to make sure that when you go to the bank, you're going to fall under that qualification category when you're going after certain credit products. 800 credit score, you should be fine with the 800 credit score. And it's all about comparables too. So, if you have good comparables, if you already have higher limit credit lines on your personal credit, it makes it that much easier. I recently had a client and he went to US Bank. No, his business was 9 months old. Okay, 9 months old, not even a year old. He got $50,000 business credit card with 0% interest for 12 months. And that was just based off of his personal credit, because he had an 800 credit score. He also had very high credit limits on his personal credit. So he had I think his highest was like 65,000 with Bank of America. And Bank of America is also one of those that will allow you to transfer your credit limit. So basically what he had did was he just had one Bank of America card for 65,000, which is better, because if you can condense that number down and you maybe only have 4 or 5 quality high limit credit cards on your profile, that's perfect, right? Because that's exactly what helped him get approved for that 50K, no documents, no nothing, and 0% interest for 12 months. So there's definitely opportunity out there. And you have to also consider, what's your best profile? Maybe you don't have the best profile with Equifax, right? But you're like, hey, I'm solid with TransUnion, I'm solid with Experian, then go after banks that pull from those bureaus, right? Sometimes you have to kind of plan your funding sequence around that. But if you're clear all across the board, then you can plan it out. You can plan, hey, this day I'm going to apply for all of the Experian banks. The next day I'm going to apply for all the Equifax banks. And while you're applying for all of those banks that just pull Experian, you might want to just lock TransUnion and Equifax. So if there's any funny business, they can't pull two. They would just have to use Experian, right? I've had people that have done that. But some banks, especially banks that were like, oh, we know they're an Experian bank, right? Or we know that they're an Equifax bank, like PenFed, even though PenFed doesn't have a business side, then no help there. But on the personal side, they're like, oh, everyone's like, oh, that's an Equifax bank. Well, yeah, they're primarily an Equifax bank. However, they also use Experian. And I know that firsthand because I see my clients getting approved using Experian for the loans and the lines of credit. Their credit cards use Equifax, but a lot of times their lines of credit and their loans, they use Experian to approve those. So credit bureaus can also vary with a bank based on the credit product, right? Bank of America is another example. They generally use Experian, right? When I applied for my personal card with them, they used Experian. When I applied for my business auto loans from them, they used Experian. But I've had a lot of clients that have applied for the business credit cards and they used TransUnion. So it can vary based on credit product. It can also vary based on your location. So for example, Chase, they're an Experian bank, right? We all can pretty much say, yeah, they are going to pull Experian. But in California here, I don't ever really see them pulling TransUnion as a second bureau. I'm like, I only see Experian. But for a lot of my clients that are in Florida, they pull Experian and TransUnion. So it can vary based on product and based on your location. Okay, let me see here. Morris, you had a question. Experian Upload gave you a message saying that we're sorry, we're unable to honor your request. I got that message after trying to upload a PDF. Yeah, they were having some issues with their system for a while. It's now back up, so you might want to just try it again. If you're still having a problem, maybe the PDF is too large or something, so you can try to break it up because you can upload like 5 different PDFs. Was it just one PDF that you uploaded, or was it like all different PDFs? It was just one PDF, just one. Okay. Yeah, maybe that file was just too big for them to process. And you can, okay, say it's like, all right, well, let me just do one PDF for like my letter and then upload the other PDFs into those other sections and see if you break it up, if that will work. And if it doesn't, then log into your Experian account because you can also upload inside of the dispute center in Experian. So once you're logged into your Experian account, you can go to the dispute center, you can dispute accounts, and then you can upload supporting documents on the Experian account as well. And then you can call in and, kind of go through it with a rep like, hey, I've uploaded this, or hey, I'm trying to upload this and it's giving me problems. Do you have an email address that I can send this to? I always like to ask them, even though I know it's going to be a no, but I'm like hoping one day that it's going to be a yes, because there was actually a new process with Equifax the other day. You know how, I don't know if you guys have ever experienced this, but if you change your address with Equifax, or if they can't verify you for some reason with Equifax, they just shut you down. And it's like you don't have a score. You're not scored. There's no data. There's no profile. There's no 3B. There's no Equifax, right? It's just nothing. And that's because there's some sort of internal lock or block, and it usually stems from an address change, right? But I was actually dealing with this for myself, and they're weird. It was just happened one day, right? And I just noticed, I'm like, wow, my Credit Karma hasn't uploaded from Equifax. So I called them, and right over the phone, they actually sent me an email and it was like a PDF document, and I was able to upload my ID, and they wanted my ID's address to match my home address. They were very adamant about that. So I uploaded my ID, which had my home address on it. I also uploaded my social security card, and right over the phone, while we were on the phone, I did this because she sent me the email, and she verified it and, took care of everything. And I was like, wow, that was great, because I've had clients where we've been dealing with this for months and their stuff is still locked. So that just goes to show processes change. They're evolving with the times. People are tired of not being able to be verified. So at least they implemented that new process for people to get verified. Yeah, you had that happen. Yeah, it's freaking horrible. And it takes so long. So just call them and see if they can unlock it. Tell them you have an internal block. It's probably because you changed your address, and tell them, hey, look, we need to get this resolved right now, right over the phone. But yeah, Experian Upload can give you issues. Just try again. Try not using a VPN. If it's for you, don't use a VPN. Like if you're just doing it for you, don't use a VPN, because they don't like VPNs. I had someone, and he's a part of this community. He was applying for something using a VPN, and they said, oh, you have to visit your local branch office. And I'm like, oh, are you using a VPN? He was like, yeah. So well, that's why they can't verify your location. So they want you to come in. The banks and funding applications and credit bureaus, they're very sensitive to the IPs, and they kind of like know when it's a VPN, especially if it's like a well-known one. Some VPNs still work, don't get me wrong, but if it is, like, turn the VPN off and then just do it. It's no big deal if you're just uploading it for yourself. And then another quick note, just to make a note of when you're applying for funding, like even if you have an 800 credit score, it's best to try to get all of your credit cards to a zero balance, except for maybe 1 or 2 cards. Even if it's like a $10 balance, a $20 balance, you're like, oh yeah, it's no big deal. Like my credit utilization overall is 12%. Yeah, I'm good. That is really important. And I actually learned that from a rep at PenFed. And he was like very open and honest with me. He's like, yeah, no, the banks look at that like a risk. So it's best that you have a zero balance on all of your credit cards. Like you can have a balance on one, right? Banks are going to understand that. But if you have a balance on every card that you have, even if it's $2, $20, or $2,000, they look at that like, somewhat of a risk. So just try to, pay the, rest of the cards down, maybe just keep a balance on one and wait for that to update. And then, you should be pretty solid with just some credit card funding initially to get you some funding. And then you can also look into, the local banks that are wanting to invest in the community, and doing some, searches for some local community development finance, banks in your area, and start interviewing some local banks, because there's still small little gems out there. And those are the ones that nobody talks about, because nobody knows who they are, and they might just be local to you. Like I have so many local banks that I have on my list to go visit, and just walk in and have a conversation, or just call and have a conversation and interview them and see if they would be a good bank for what I'm looking for, which is no doc business line of credit, or no doc business line of equipment line of credit. Those are the things that we want to find. Those banks are still out there, but they're small. Like Bank of Nevada is a small little, bank, but those are the gems, and soon as we all start talking about them on YouTube, that's when they blow up. And, it's like, the deal is done. Now we have to give 2 years worth of tax returns, right? Okay, so you just filed your foreign entity in Texas. Yep, your corporation was in Wyoming. Yep, a lot of those shelf corps are like Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, all that area, because you don't see the transfer in ownership. And that's really important. But that's good, because now you can go and try to find some local banks in Texas to you and start interviewing them. I know for a fact there's still a ton of banks in Texas that offer no doc business line of credit. You probably aren't going to get more than like 50K per bank, right? Because that's usually where they cap it at, 50K without any documents. Chase is a little bit more, but they're kind of, getting a little bit more strict. So, but you can definitely probably do 250K credit cards with Chase. by just working with your local relationship manager. And if you don't like the way that one conversation is going with one at one branch, go to another branch and see if, they're talking a better situation. Because I actually was speaking to a customer last week, and he was in this community. I don't know if he's here on this call or not, but he was telling me that a Chase rep, he was applying for some Chase cards or Chase business credit card or something. I think it was a Chase business credit card. And a Chase rep told him that he had too much available personal credit. I had never heard of such a thing, right? And I said, what? So he said, yeah, they told me that I need to reduce my credit limits. I need to lower my credit limits. So I did. I was like, wow, I have never heard that. And I have $250,000 in personal credit cards on my personal credit report. So, and I have Chase on the personal and the business side, and I have never, ever heard of that. So he did it. And then he was asking me, I just can't figure out why I can't get approved for more than like a $3,000 or $4,000 credit card. And I go, well, what's your highest credit limit on your personal credit report? He's like, oh, it's like $4,000 or $5,000. Bingo. Okay, comparable credit. That's why you're not getting approved for higher limits, because your average credit limit on your personal credit is, between $3,000 and $5,000 because you lowered your credit limits. And now that's exactly what you're getting approved for on the business side. And that's why it's so important. Like, if you don't like the way that they're talking, like lowering your credit limits, who would say that? And it's like, no, absolutely not, Absolutely not. And he kind of shot himself in the foot by doing so, because now he's, stuck in those baby approvals. Like, he's just now getting his limits back up and asking for credit limit increases and all that good stuff. So it's like, oh man, I was blown away at hearing that story. Right. So Tony said about the stacking. Yeah, basically you just want to stack up. So if you're going to be doing like funding stacking, basically you're just stacking credit applications on top of each other and applying for them at the same time, essentially. So if I were credit stacking, I would plan it out. I would do my interviews, right, with the banks, and I would find about 6 banks per bureau. So I would find about 6 banks that were going to pull from Experian for what I'm applying for, right? In this case, it would be business credit cards. 6 banks that pull Experian for business credit cards. Now, I know Chase is one of those that's very inquiry sensitive, so I'm going to need to apply with them first. And I know I'm going to have to probably go like in branch to make it even that much better. Like, you can go online and you're going to probably get like an average approval online. The average approvals online are usually between 17 and 20K on the personal side, and usually between about 22 and 35 on the business side. But if you go in branch and work with a relationship manager, that can be a lot higher. So I recommend that. So you can do the in branch application with Chase first, and then maybe go home and finish the rest of those, 5 banks that are going to be pulling from Experian. Fill out the application simultaneously on your computer, and then hit the submit button. Boom, 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 all at the same time. The reason being is that way they won't see each other's inquiries, because it's all going to be happening at the same time. Because if they see a bunch of new inquiries, then they might question and might deny you, right? When you are applying for credit, it's essential that you do not have any fraud alerts on your credit report, or do not have any consumer statements on your credit report. Okay, because that's going to, or, not saying it's going to cause a denial. It can cause a denial, but it's going to flag them to say, oh, wait, hold on, they got something there. We got to call them before we approve them, or maybe just deny them, But if you are denied for anything that you think you should get approved for, just Google the reconsideration line for that particular bank and call in and speak to the reconsideration folks and say, hey, I just applied for this. I have an 800 credit score. I'm not sure why I was denied. Can you take a look at this and offer reconsideration. I know PenFed does not do reconsiderations. They'll make you just submit another application, but they've been kind of funky lately. Like if you don't have less than 2 inquiries, no open accounts in like 12 months, then you could probably get, a high limit credit card with them. But they've been really stingy lately. And I've had a lot of people that I used to get high limit approvals, no problem, are like, not so much anymore, so that just kind of goes to show the banks are definitely tightening up. And that's why you find 6 banks instead of 4, because 2 of them you possibly might get a denial from, right? But if you do, so be it. Work on whatever they're telling you the reason being behind it, and you call into the reconsideration line, and next time you'll know, right? And then do that for banks that pull Experian, banks that pull Equifax, banks that pull from TransUnion. You can find banks from all of them. I've got the credit pulls. There's a list in here if you just type in credit pulls. But another resource that I like to use is, what is it called? The credit pull database. And not all of this is going to be 100% accurate. Credit boards. And they also have, the MyFICO forms, which are super helpful as well. But I like to go to credit boards and look at the credit pulls, because I can get an idea of what's been happening lately. Because just because, this bank was known to pull TransUnion 2 years ago, has anything changed? There's some banks that are going through changes, like Discover and Capital One are becoming one. First Tech and DCU are becoming one, just like, SunTrust Bank and BBVA or BBN, whatever, they became Truist, so a lot of times banks merge. But if I were to look and say, we'll just use Texas, right? I can go to credit boards and go to their credit pulls database and look for the state of Texas. And if I'm looking for, all 3 of these, I can essentially select all 3 and say, I want to look at everyone that was approved, like, probably within the last year. So I'm going to say, maybe 2024. I want recent data that I can really analyze and see, okay, is this, updated? And then you can kind of get an idea of what other people are getting approved for. Is there no records? Like, see, some of this is like outdated, I feel like. But I like to kind of still get an idea. So let's just take the date range out. Maybe it doesn't like the date range. Okay, we'll just make it easy, because I know there's always data in here. So there's April of 2024. That's, a little over a year ago. 708, this is Lexus Financial. So it's kind of like, I always like to look at this stuff and it's like, okay, well, that's good to know, Synchrony, that's a Verizon. 725, that's kind of a low credit limit, but you can get some good data and kind of like some good groundwork to kind of go off of here. But if you have a solid profile, solid 800, high credit limits, like what you've done, there's no reason why you should get approved. So that's why I always tell people, call into the reconsideration line and get a rep on the phone. Okay, so Morris, you have a question. Can you tell me why my FTC report was not updating in the statements section? I created a login and created one previously. So after I created one, you went in, you finalized it in the report, and then it did not show the statement section, and now you're working on your wife's file. That's a good question. So if you're having issues with it updating, you can always do another report, right? Just do a whole new report. And I know it's a pain in the butt, but sometimes it doesn't always update. It's really meant for like the account section, because they have like, 3 different sections where you can add various account information and then inquiry information. So I think, you're kind of stuck in that realm sometimes. And also you only have so many characters for the statement section too. So if you go beyond, I want to say, is it like 100 or 200 characters you have in that section? It's very limited. So that's why when you are making your consumer statement in that consumer statement additional info section, you want to keep it as brief as possible. Like, even like these are unauthorized, inquiries unauthorized or unauthorized inquiries, and then colon, and then just list those things out. But the less characters as possible, so that way you can fit all that data in there. Because if it's over the character limit, it's not going to update. It's not going to save. So just be aware of that. And then CEO had a question. Do you still use other cards with no balance? Are you supposed to? So here's my kind of like thought process behind that, right? You want to work your cards for a few months at a time. All right. You don't have to keep a balance on your cards. I know some people have been told it's best to keep a balance on them so you have activity, and it doesn't really matter, to be honest, because they're still going to report an on-time payment. Sometimes your cards become dormant, right? That's okay as well, right? But you do want to use it every so often so the card won't close it. Generally, a lot of the, banks out there aren't necessarily going to close your card because you don't have a balance on it, but you don't want to allow it to stay dormant for so long, because then they might close it on you. This happens a lot with like store credit cards, because obviously they want you to come in, they want you to spend money. And if you're not going to use their card, they're just going to close it on you. They're notorious for that. Care Credit, Synchrony, all those ones, right? So you work your cards, and I don't ever recommend getting those type of store cards. Like, I understand the Care Credit, it's good to have. It's also usually a higher limit, so that's fine. But the other store cards, no, we don't want any of those. I don't care what you're going to save. It's a setup. They're always super low limits and they just suck, right? And usually that's what gets people in trouble with their utilization, because they're such a low limit. So if they go buy like, back to school clothes, it's like they're using their entire credit limit. So it's a maxed out card that's reporting. So yeah, leave those store cards alone. Don't close them if you already have them. Just keep them at a zero balance and use them like once or twice a year. So hopefully that'll suffice them, right? But like what I do is, for example, I just got the Reflect card from Wells Fargo a couple months back, but they only gave me like a low limit. It wasn't even like $7,000. I got like 10, I think, on the Built card. So I was like, okay, that's all right. Let me see about this Reflect card, because it has the longest 0% interest for 21 months. I was like, yeah, sure, I'll use that card, but they gave me a super low limit. So when I called in to tell them, hey, I don't even want this card if it's going to be like this low of a limit, they're like, oh, well, it's too late. So I kept it. And basically, I'm just working that card. So I'm putting all of my expenses on that card and I'm paying it off like every week. Like, I'm making multiple payments. So I'm working the card, right? That's what I call working the card. And you can work 1 to 2 cards a month, right? If you can, like, whatever someone's comfortable with, right? But I have a couple cards. I do that one, and I also do my Chase card, because I always want to raise my limits on my Chase card. So Wells Fargo and Chase is what I'm working right now. I've already done Navy Federal. I've already maxed out at 80,000. I've worked those cards up to the limits, right? Now I'm working these cards, and I keep all those cards at a zero balance and locked inside of the app. So that way, nothing can happen. And those are just like decoration on my credit report. And I'm just really careful with the, statement dates. So I always make sure that the balances are paid about 5 business days prior to the statement date, so I don't allow a large balance to report to the credit bureau. So use the credit card tracking log. There's a credit card tracking log inside of the community, and this is going to help you basically stay organized with your credit cards. I think there's in here, maybe manufacturer spending tips. I know it's in here somewhere. I know there's so much stuff in here. Sometimes it's hard to find things, but I will, now maybe it's in here. I know I've put it in here before. Credit card tracking log. But here it is. You definitely want to have this log put together with all of your credit cards on it. So you have all of your pertinent information, like when the statement date is, when the due date is, and you can change these dates around too. So if you're like, man, I want half my cards to have a statement date of the 15th, and I want all my other cards, like half my cards to be 15th, half my cards to be maybe like the 1st or the end of the month, right? And you can do that. It might just take like a billing cycle for it to actually update, but that That way you're like, okay, I know for sure that, these cards that I'm working right now, their statement date is the 15th. So I know by the 10th of every month, I got to make sure that they have a zero balance, because I don't want this big old balance reporting to the credit bureaus to mess up my utilization. Because the banks are going to know what you're doing, right? We're spending, we're paying, we're spending, we're paying, right? And that way you work your limits up. And a lot of times I don't even ask for credit limit increases. The banks will just give them to me, although I do ask every 6 months. I just had PayPal. I have a PayPal, I was a line of credit. Now it's turning into a credit card, but I haven't really used it a lot. Like I used it a lot and then I paid it off, used it and paid it off. And then I kind of stopped using it after it was paid off. And then they gave me an $800 credit limit increase. Like I didn't even ask for it. They just gave it to me. I was like, oh, okay, well, that's cool. So sometimes you'll see that too. A lot of times when you're spending, paying, and then you pay it off, they'll probably automatically give you a credit limit increase. Tony, you'd love to know why they told him that. Me too. I was blown away when he told me the story, and I was like, oh my God, like I have never heard that. And from someone that has like too much personal credit on their credit profile, like $250,000 for myself, I said, I've never been told that, not even from Chase. And I have Chase. And so I was like, man, I wish, you could have gone back in time and just said, no, I'm not doing that, because the banks do not have your best interest. All right. The banks half the time don't know what the hell they're talking about. The banks half the time, all that they know is what the banks tell them and what's inside of their, processes, their SOP, their rule book, basically. Right. And what the banks have trained them on. So for her to tell him, oh, you have too much available, personal credit, I was like just floored, and I couldn't believe that he actually lowered his limits for them to appease them. And it's like, wow, but that just goes to show you, if you don't like what they're talking about, hey, no, thank you. Okay. I will find another Chase person to deal with at another branch, because that's just one single person at Chase. And out of all the people that I have helped that have had Chase, got approvals from Chase, that is a first for me. So it's just, who knows why that was told. I was blown away. But that's a prime example of what happens when you have lower limits and then you go and try to get business credit cards and you're getting approved for a bunch of lower limits. They kind of mirror what's on your personal credit. So if you haven't had even a $10,000 personal credit card, what makes you think that they're going to give you a $20,000 business credit card? That comparable credit is really important. And people have to understand, these authorized users, that's the way to climb up faster, especially if you do it on the personal side the right way. Like, for example, you've done everything, you've built up a little, primary stuff, you add the authorized users, and then you apply for some of these credit unions like Navy Federal, or if you're building up some other relationships with other credit unions, that's like the low hanging approvals that we're looking for is, get those AUs, get those credit union approvals. Usually they're like 20, 25,000. And of course, build up to that, before you apply for them, make sure that you've been with them for at least 3 billing cycles, right? Preferably 6. The more, the merrier. You don't want to seem like you're just a member with them to ask for credit. You get 5 or more banking products. You're kind of setting yourself up for success. So that way, when you are ready to apply for something, there's no reason why they should tell you no. You've done a great job of, marking off all of the, boxes as far as like, hey, do you have direct deposit? I have a checking account. I have a savings account. I have overdraft protection. I did a CD account with them. Even though a CD, which is a certificate of deposit, is not reported to your credit, banks love them because you're investing into the bank. And guess what? They get to play with your money for, whatever the term is, like a year, and they can like 10x that, right? It's really like worth a lot more to the bank because, even though it might be only $1,000 to us, they can like 10x that money. So they're like, yeah, heck yeah, we love people that invest in us, right? And then doing those secured loans, that the credit unions offer. You know, not every credit union is going to offer the secured loan play where you use your own savings account and use it for, you know, building credit. And that's a great way that you can build that relationship up with the bank. It doesn't cost you a hard inquiry, but it reports to all 3 credit bureaus, and the banks love it. And you still have access to the funds. So I would much rather someone do a secured loan versus a secured credit card, because that secured credit card is, number one, only generally going to go up to about maybe $5,000. That's usually the cap. There's some places that will let you go more for a secured credit card, but usually it's about $5K, right? You're not going to have access to that $5K. It's basically going to be locked away. And who knows when you're going to get that money back, you know, and or if you're going to get that money back, right? Is that card ever going to graduate? You know, the Discover It graduates eventually, but is that going to be the same case now that they're with Capital One? I don't know, right? It used to be about 7 months and then you would get your deposit back. With Navy Federal, I've had some people that have done their secured credit card and were with them for over a year and it still hadn't graduated. So, you know, you just never know if and when that card is going to graduate and you'll get your deposit back. And then I've had other people where they've done, you know, a bigger limit secured credit card and they're like, hey, I need those funds back. So I have to cancel the card to get my money back. And it's like, well, that's counterproductive, because once we have credit cards open, we do not want to close them because that's killing our history. And now we don't have that trade line to show our payment history. And even if you do have a secured card that you don't use, right? So for example, I had, you know, a ton of secured cards at one point. I have finally come to the point where I've canceled them all out. So I don't have any left. I've canceled like the Tomos, the pedal ones. Like I focused on really cleaning up my profile. So now it's just like the bank credit cards. But it took me about 5 years to be able, well, I probably more than that, but a good 5 years to be able to close them so I could get my deposits back and just not have those crappy cards, right? I didn't use them anyway, because if I were to even get gas with them, it would be a really high utilization. You know, I got gas today and it was $76. If I have a $200 secured credit card and I go get gas for $76, that's killing my utilization right there, right? But even if you have secured cards and you don't use it, which is best, they're just decoration, they're still going to report as an on-time payment every single month. So you do not have to have a balance. You do not have to use your card every month for it to report a positive report. In fact, I had a ton that I never used that were just sitting on my profile that would just continue to report that on-time payment, right? And then there was a few that had like a monthly fee, which I hated. I think Credit One was one of them. Like every month they're charging like $8. I was like, for what? Like, this is so stupid. And then Tomo, was it Tomo or Pedal? One of those was like another $8 every single month. So it seemed like my credit accounts with them always had that $8 balance. It was so annoying, but that's just how it was with those companies. But they still reported, you know, that on-time payment. So it was kind of like I was paying them for a trade line, but you know, no more. Okay, next question. So you have your credit score up and you have a clean profile with TransUnion and Equifax. Your Experian is the only one that you're fighting with to get that bankruptcy off. But the other two, you could get a trade line to help you. Yep, because you're trying to get a loan for purchasing property. Your TransUnion is 741, Equifax is 681 because you purchased a truck through GM and it dropped your credit score 74 points. So attaching a trade line help? Yes, attaching a trade line would help. Anytime you add a new account to your profile, it can drop your credit score because that is going to be a new account, right? And then B, it is reducing your credit history, right? So every time we add a new credit account to our credit profile, it's reducing our credit history. So that's why, you know, a lot of times when people are initially building credit on their personal credit, I tell them you really don't need more than like, you know, 6 credit cards, for installment loans, because every time you add those new ones in, it's just holding your history back. And your history is 15% of your credit score, right? And I'm sure when you went to the dealership, they probably ran your credit a bunch. So those can potentially take a little hit, but the data just doesn't look good. So anytime you add a trade line, in your case, you would want to add history, because that's probably where you took the hit from. So you would need to find a trade line that had the most amount of history on it. Maybe you get like a $10,000 or $20,000 credit trade line, but that history is going to be the most impactful for your credit at this time. Usually you can expect, it's hard to say exactly for each person what number they're going to get, right? But it's usually between like 2 and 5 points per year, right? So some people get like 30, 40, 50 points, but everyone is completely different, right? I've seen some people that have gotten like super high boosts, and I was like really shocked over it, but they had a really thin profile. So they really didn't have much going on. They had like a mid 600 that would take them up to like a mid 7, just because of that history. But, if you add more, it's going to give you a bigger increase. But for this, I would say maybe 1 or 2 aged credit trade lines, and with a nice limit, so that way you can eventually piggyback off that, because the GM card is like, a new auto, but you might be able to piggyback off these and get, a couple credit cards, especially if you've been building up some relationships with like some credit unions or even some banks. Then you can, get those AUs and then use Equifax and TransUnion to apply for some new credit cards and hopefully get a couple high limit credit cards. Navy, they pull TransUnion. There's a lot of places. The Apple credit card pulls TransUnion. They used to have the GM financial card, but that is no more. But there's Barclays, because the GM financial card that they used to have on the personal credit and the business credit is now a Barclays card. I know, because I have the GM card, and I just got their message saying, hey, your card's going to be a Barclays card pretty soon. So yeah, Barclays has a ton of cards on the personal side. US Bank is also TransUnion. Elon Financial is TransUnion. And I know a lot of people think Elon Financial is like a bank. It's not. It's actually a credit card processor. So if I were to go to like Fidelity and apply for their credit card, it's going to be the Elon Financial card. So I'll kind of show you guys what that looks like, because all of these Elon Financial credit cards look the same, the application. So when you click on it, I don't know, it's going to make me log in, those dirty dogs. Let me see if I can just look at their credit card application. Some of these banks will make you log in, but Fidelity is one of the ones that uses Elon Financial. There's a lot of other credit unions and banks that use Elon. Inside of here, if we just type in Elon, we'll bring up a bunch of Elon places. Let's see. For example, these are the credit pulls. So this could be helpful in your case too, because these are all banks that pull from Equifax, because Equifax was always like the hardest one for me. Like, who pulls from Equifax? PenFed's credit cards are Equifax. So if you do a pledge loan with them and really focus on your relationship with them, they give out high limit credit cards. Citibank, they do Equifax. In fact, I just applied for a Citibank card and it was Equifax. Chevron, Federal Credit Union, they're really easy to get into as well. Who else is pretty good? Truist. Yep, they're good. If you can get into Truist, they're probably one of my favorites for Equifax. And there's, some smaller ones here that may be helpful to you. And who knows, there might be some that are local to where you live at, right? Here's some of the ones from TransUnion. BMO Harris is another one. BECU, Connexus. This is an Elon one. So we can actually just use them. And Elon is actually owned by US Bank, and they have personal and business credit cards. So you'll start kind of noticing the pattern here, right? It's always going to tell you, oh, are you okay with going to this external website? website. The website is always going to be like credit card, learn more, right? What was it when we first went there? It was, it went so fast. It's like learn more credit card. That's like all of their websites, right? Because they're affiliated with Elon. Elon is the one that provides the credit cards because Connexus, they, as a bank, do not provide credit cards to consumers or businesses. They contract their credit cards out with Elon Financial, just like thousands of other small financial institutions do, right? Just to kind of still offer it, still make money from it, but not have the headache because Elon handles all of that for them, right? And you'll start noticing the little icon, it's all the same. The layout looks all the same. These are the personal cards. These are the business cards. And you'll start noticing that all of these Elon Financial applications look the same, but they have some really good credit cards. And sometimes they have, special offers. Like this one's a limited time offer. They still have the 18 months, 0% interest. So if that's going to be the best fit for you, if you're looking to like pay off some other cards or, just not have to pay interest, it might be better for you. If you're looking to travel, anytime you see the word like signature or travel card, like this one, airport lounge access, like this is probably going to be a higher limit card because it focuses on travel, right? Cash back, if that's, important to you, they have a secured card. Obviously, we don't want that, right? And then down here you can see Elon Financial. So they're going to be primarily TransUnion, but there's so many banks out there. I have another list of, I wanted to look at that too, because that one has some good information on it. Where is this at? So much stuff in here. Okay, so this is the credit card stacking tips sheet that I have inside of the community, and you want to watch these videos. But this kind of breaks down like, some information about the, banks that we all see on our average, street corner and, advertisements for. Some of them are still worth going to and applying for, like NASA Federal Credit Union. They're really good too if you, for some reason, cannot get into Navy Federal. But this is usually going to be like your round one of funding. Like these are some of the banks that you can pretty much bank on, like Chase, Bank of America, American Express. I wouldn't say Discover anymore because now they're, same as Capital One. And to me, I don't like Capital One because they pull all three credit bureaus. So I never have my clients apply for Capital One unless it's like a dire need of a credit card for some reason. And even if they are in a dire need of a credit card, probably not, because I know they're only going to get probably like not even $500 limit. So I don't like Capital One, but US Bank, Citi, these are all really good options. This is wrong. It should be TransUnion because US Bank is actually TransUnion. But most of these others, you'll notice they're mostly going to be like Experian, except for Capital One, it's going to be all three. This is some tier 2. You can look at some regional banks like Barclays, PNC. PNC is kind of little bit more strict now. They want like without a relationship, they want a 780 credit score and they want a $10,000 initial deposit. They want a lot now to give out like some credit. With a relationship, they want a 750 credit score. And, it's like, they're not really giving out more than 20,000 in a credit card initially. So, they've definitely tightened up over the last 2 years. But Navy Fed, they're good. You can get their personal cards so you can get some high limits. Those open up the door for other banks and financial institutions. They also have the business card, not the best, but it's there. It's something that someone can definitely probably leverage and take advantage of, right? And then you've got your Elon Financial card. So this has got some good information in it, definitely. But, you want to put your own plan together and figure out what, based on your goals, based on what you need, based on what you're doing, what is going to be the best plan of action for you, right? Because, if you're going to be applying for a bunch of funding, what are you going to do with it, right? You got to figure out what you're going to do with it. And if you're going to be going after the 0% interest, you want to try to find the highest, time frame for that. Because I've had people that have come back to me and said, oh my gosh, my 0% interest is getting ready to expire. What do I do? And at that point, we'll have to find more 0% interest credit cards, but we're basically like kind of just leveraging them to not have to pay interest on the first one. So there was a problem in stage one because we didn't get that balance paid off in time. So you have to have a good plan on how you're going to pay back all of this debt, because it's definitely going to be a payment, and you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot with your first set of funding, because that's just a drop in the bucket for these banks. You can go so much further and get so much more funding, because that's what progression is. Getting more funding over time and showing that you can manage this funding. So you're ready for more funding. You really have to make sure that you don't take on more than you can, manage, right? And I know some people have taken on a lot of credit, but they also had very high income paying jobs. So that way, if the business did fail, they would be able to pay it either way, right? So you always want to have that backup, covered, because what if it doesn't go right? Or what if I go get a bunch of, Airbnb units or vehicles for Turo, and there are some months that I can't cover all of my expenses. You have to have that nest egg saved or some additional streams of revenue just as a backup precautionary, especially in this day and age, because those bills are coming no matter what. And I've talked to a few people where they had really sad stories. One lady in particular, she got a bunch of 0% interest business credit cards, and she thought she was investing in real estate, and she kept paying into like this program. Come to find out, the guy was a scammer. There was no real estate, there was no properties. He scammed millions and millions of dollars from people. He didn't even live in the US, but she said, she's like, I'm a smart lady, I have a lot of degrees from colleges. She's like, you would have thought that I would know that he was a scammer, but he doesn't look like a scammer. He doesn't talk like a scammer. And even when he scams you, he can make you feel like he's dealing with personal issues, so you feel bad. And it was like, that's the prime example of a scammer. What are you talking about? But some people just don't see it until it's too late. And she basically maxed out all of her business credit cards and has no way to pay them back. And I was like, I am so sorry that this happened to you, but you probably need to file bankruptcy, because those debt collectors are going to be wanting their money, and just because you were scammed and you invested into this program that doesn't qualify for not paying the debt back, unfortunately. So probably Jay Morrison, right? But he was one of the scammers, but this gentleman did not live in the US. So he was like in Dubai or something like that. I don't know. But, a lot of these scammers that talk about these real estate ventures and shit like that, it's like, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And if you are looking to get into real estate, you really have to be careful, because it's a lot of risk. It's a lot of reward, right? We always have to take risk in business, but it's a high valued risk, right? And sometimes we got to start a little bit lower and work up to that, because it's a safer move, right? And that's progression, and that's the smarter, safer way to go about it. Even though it might sound good, sometimes it's not always that way, right? But when it comes to credit, you just have to have a good plan. Don't take on more than you can afford to pay back, because that payment's coming in 30 days, whether you're ready for it or not. And on the business side, there is no 30-day period where it's like, oh, well, if you don't pay it and you're still if you pay it and you're only 29 days late, then we're not going to report you as late. Because on the personal side, you get up to 30 days past the due date before they report you late, right? Once you are 30 days past that due date, that's when they actually report you as 30 days late. Now you're going to get that late fee as well, which is going to be hefty. So you're going to have to pay that and catch up, right? But on the business side, if you are 1 day past the due date, you are late and they will report you late. And that is detrimental. It's almost like you just might as well just hang it up and start all over. And I've had people where they've gotten Quill accounts and all these stupid Net 30 accounts, and then they over leveraged themselves and they had all of these invoices that they had to pay at the same time and they couldn't afford to pay them. So now they're getting late payments because they couldn't pay a $300 Quill bill, and it's just like, it's super counterproductive. So we want to go slow, go at our own pace. You don't need 20 trade lines. You don't need 10 trade lines. You need solid trade lines that are of higher value, that are going to help you with comparable credit get to the goal, right? And you can get a lot of funding using business credit cards, and you can liquidate the money off the business credit cards, but you just need to make sure, rain or snow or hail, that within 30 days you have the minimum payment due. Right. And if you're at 0% interest, it shouldn't be so bad. It should be still pretty manageable. But I've talked enough tonight, guys. Does anyone else have any other questions before we wrap it up for this session? All right. Well, hey, thank you guys for hanging out with me. Listen to me talk about credit. I enjoyed it as always. If you need me, you know where to find me. Yes, happy Father's Day to everybody out there. I hope you guys all enjoy your special day tomorrow and you get everything. Yeah, no, thank you guys for being here. I appreciate you guys all for spending time with me this evening. It's Saturday night. We can be out hanging out, partying with our friends, but we're here talking about credit, which, I gave up partying a long time ago. So for me, that's nothing new. When I got into this credit business, I was like, look, I gave up everything. I barely got friends left. I literally locked myself into a room and became a shell of a person because I was so focused on this business and pumping content out. And sometimes that's what you got to do. You just got to like disappear for a little bit, right? It kind of worked out well because I feel like now I look back at all the money and time that I wasted doing all that, going out and buying a VIP table for, thousands of dollars to get, a bottle of Grey Goose. That's what, $30 at most. Oh God, make it make sense. I was wasting so much. But at any rate, you guys get into this classroom section. When you log into the community, this is the community. You can do a search for what you're looking for up here, and it'll bring up different posts, and it'll also bring up stuff that's inside of the classroom section. But go through the classroom section. There's so much information in here. There's the master classes, there's a lot to go through. There's the credit repair training. So whether you're looking for credit repair stuff or business credit stuff, you can find it in here. Building credit. I'm going to be adding some new videos coming this week, and I'll post when those are ready. But go through a lot of these, sections in here. And yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys. I appreciate it because I put a lot of work into all of the content that I have in here for you guys. So you guys will have a wealth of information, because I know based on experience from other people that I've talked to that have been parts of other communities, they hardly have access to anything. Like, it was a great price. They paid less than they would have to join this, but they don't have access to anything. And a lot of their master classes and replays are like, $1,000 or like $500 to watch, which is ridiculous. You guys have access to everything in here. You can create your own digital products using Canva. So there's just a lot of information. You just have to spend the time to go through it, listen to the videos. When you're driving, put one of the videos on. I know they're long. I apologize, but they're filled with so much information, but just take the time to listen in. That's what I used to do when I was at work. I would have my headphone in one ear and I would listen to credit stuff all day at my desk. I would listen to it on my commute to work, on my commute home. I would only listen to music on Fridays. That was my one day I gave myself to listen to music on my commute. Other than that, I was like all credit stuff. And so, sometimes you just got to get obsessed, and sometimes you have to hear things a few different times for it to like have that aha moment, and that was same way for me. I was like so foreign to a lot of these, different terminologies. I was like, what's a statement date? What's a closing date? What's a credit trade line? What's a primary trade line? What is an installment loan? What's a revolving account? Like, do I need those? Listen, I've been there myself. I put a glossary together. There's a glossary in here. If you type in glossary, there's a credit glossary for you guys, because that was one of the things that I needed help with, learning the terminology for all of these different words that we use in this business. So, man, I thought I was illiterate. I was like, I always got approved for things because I always had about a 770, 780, back then that was good enough to get you whatever you wanted as long as you paid your bills on time, which I did. But my problem was furniture. I would get these furniture store credit cards and I would max them out. So I would always stay below a 700. Now being educated, I didn't know I was shooting myself in the foot, So yeah, boy. Whew. But we live and learn, and now we're here today and we're learning. Some people think they're late to the party. I was very late to the party. Don't feel bad. You're never too late. You're right on time because we weren't interested in this, and there becomes a time and a place for it. And now is the time and now is the place. And with the economy the way it is, if you build it the right way, the funding will still come. All right, guys. So I appreciate you guys all. We'll see you next class. I'll see you in the community. If you need help, you can book a call with me and we can chat more one-on-one. If you go into the community, you can go to my book a call section right there on the top, and you can book a one-on-one call with me, and we can break down what a good game plan would be for you if you need it. If not, there's a wealth of information inside of here. All you have to do is just take the time to go through it. So again, thanks guys. Happy Father's Day, and I will see you all next time. Take care. Have a great Saturday evening, everyone. Bye.